We'll go ahead and introduce our guest speakers and they can get started. First, we have Yema Thomas, and she is a blossoming art historian, visual performing artist, and museum educator who develops and manages ongoing community programs and special exhibition related events at the High Museum of Art. She is coordinator of public programs there, and she is passionate about designing programs to showcase the presence of unique and cultural activities within her community. And we also have Evelyn Newsome. She is Education Department Coordinator at the High Museum, where she has worked since 2019. She graduated from the University of Georgia with a bachelor's in art history and a double minor in studio art and design and media. In her current role as office coordinator of the Education Department, she works closely with the Director of Education and Head of Creative Aging and Lifelong Learning to develop programs, lead communications with museum board members, and oversee the departmental budget. So thank you, Yema and Evelyn, for being here today, and go ahead and take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Jamie. And thank you, Dr. Weed, for having us here tonight. I will go ahead and share our presentation. But like Jamie said, my name's Evelyn Newsome. I am the department coordinator for the Education Department at the High Museum. I split my time between working with the Director of Education and working in the Creative Aging and Lifelong Learning Department. So it's in that department where I do most of my community outreach and marketing and all of that stuff. And so that's what I'll be speaking about tonight. Through this presentation, I hope to give you all sort of a behind the scenes look at how organizations begin to form those community connections. So the term creative aging is a fairly new one. I certainly did not know what this meant before I started working at the High Museum, but the name sort of gives it away. And ultimately, creative aging is using the arts to improve the quality of life for older adults through creative expression and social engagement. This terminology is really only becoming more and more used. The nation, and even more importantly, Atlanta, is experiencing a dramatic demographic shift. So I have a couple of statistics up on the screen, but as you can see, my first one, by 2030, 1 in 4 of Atlanta's residents will be over the age of 65. That ratio in 2019 was only 1 in 8. So we are a rapidly aging city. Nationally, the number of Americans aged 65 and older will nearly double between 2012 and 2050. So why is this important, and how does it relate to the High Museum? At the High, we want to make sure that we are engaging audiences of all ages. And an increase in the older adult population calls for an increase in programming, a change in programming, a change in policies and priorities. But this increase also means an increase in negative stereotypes and ageism and social isolation that can be really detrimental to the overall health of older individuals. The purpose of creative aging, and really ultimately the purpose for the High Museum, is this last bullet, where we hope that we can socially engage these individuals. We want to be able to provide a space where we can build a community. We want to challenge intellect and be able to provide an opportunity for older adults to learn a new skill and preserve culture. So how does this happen? How do you kind of begin to interact and engage the community? From the very beginning, we knew that we wanted to conduct an audience research study so that we can learn about the community from the community. So we partnered with a firm called Audience Focus Incorporated. They're a research firm that's dedicated to audience research in museums and other cultural organizations. So I have here some of the goals that we're focusing on with this research. And number one is just understanding the audience. You know, what is creative aging? Who are these people? How can we best serve them? And what do they need from us? And second, through this research, we plan to create a visioning document that outlines the High's kind of vision and values as it relates to serving visitors age 60 and older. And then lastly, we will put this visioning document into practice, use it as a guide to help us cater to older adults as best we can, whether that is through programming or newsletters or blog posts, anything in that nature. So with this audience-focused research, the methodology is sort of split up into 3 parts. Our first step, we conducted about 100 30-minute interviews with residents in the Atlanta metro area. And we did this from October through December, and had to transcribe all of the interviews, which was a very daunting task in and of itself. But I was able to conduct a handful of interviews, and it was honestly so fascinating and also so refreshing to speak to all these people, some who had no connection with the High Museum and some who were very frequent visitors and who loved some of our staple programs. But we learned a lot from this initial interview portion of the research study, and something that I personally took away is that many people that I interviewed spoke of our exhibitions, and that was really the only thing that they knew about the High Museum. They weren't really aware of any programming, especially any programming, catered towards them. And so it's kind of an interesting situation. It's good that, our exhibitions are drawing this older adult crowd and that they really love it, but only visiting the High to see the exhibitions doesn't foster that sense of community that we really hope to create for this group. Another primary study that I think will come out of this research is how to market to this particular audience. How do we ensure that these people know that the High is a place for them? It's not just a place for toddlers and families and millennials, but it's also somewhere where they can come and they can socially engage and form that community. After analyzing the data, that's when we'll create that draft visioning document, which we'll share with advisors, stakeholders, any other groups to get that critical feedback, so then we can finalize that document and put it into practice. So with our programming, I wanted to talk a little bit about that. We currently just had the first session of both of these programs this week, actually. Learning to Look is a 6-week art history course that focuses on bestowing beauty, one of our new exhibitions. That is led by Maggie Squires, who is a PhD candidate at the Courtauld Institute in London. And then we also have Masterworks in Mindfulness, led by Sharice M. Williams. It combines meditative techniques with close-looking skills so that participants can kind of center themselves and also better engage with their audience or with the works of art themselves. Some upcoming plans that we have, we hope to do some walking tours in Atlanta to explore public art this summer. And we also hope to do studio sessions and gallery conversations. And I'm sure we'll touch on this a little bit later with some of the questions, but when it comes to marketing, we've kind of been focusing on Facebook as our main social media outlet, which I think will be interesting to learn from the research study. I think it's kind of a stereotype that older people really only use Facebook. They don't go near Instagram. So I'm very curious to see if, Instagram is just as powerful a tool as Facebook is as well. But for our purposes at the moment, Facebook has worked really well. We create events, Facebook events for each of our programs, and then we also run Facebook ads for the programs. And for these two that I have up on the screen, the Facebook ads did a lot of work. They bumped Masterworks and Mindfulness double registration-wise, and then Learning to Look, we had about 12 total participants, and it jumped up to 19. And our cap for that art history class is 20. So I would say that we pretty much reached our goals through that way. But yeah, these are a couple programs that we hope to offer. If you have any grandparents or great aunts or uncles that might be interested, shoot them our way. We would love to have them. But that is my little spiel. I will pass it on to Yema, who will give you an insight into the work that she does.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Yema Thomas. I coordinate public programs at the High Museum of Art. And I'm delighted to be here today to kind of give you all an inside look into the work that I do at the museum. So we're going to start with talks and lectures. And as you all know, we're living in a pandemic. So we have had to rethink the way that we do programming. And so for our talks and lectures, pre-COVID, we would have a lecturer come in to either the Hill Auditorium, which seated 220 people, or the Rich Theater, which seated 350. And so now we've made the switch to using Zoom to offer virtual talks and lectures. And now we have a 500 guest capacity. So we've been able to, really leverage that to market to international audiences or whoever decides to join our program. So I think that can be seen as a plus within programming. And if we're going to move on to the next slide. So some of the other programs that I help to manage are conversation pieces and some of our classes. So conversation pieces is a program that we used to hold on site every first Tuesday of the month, and where we primarily focus on works in our permanent collection. So we had a teaching artist or museum educator lead this program. It's a lunchtime learn program. So the program is from 12 to 12:30. And with COVID, we made a switch. So we're now relying on the efforts of staff in the education department to help put this program on. So each week now we're holding the sessions, and we kind of made a pivot from on-site to virtual. And so we had programs every week. And now we're kind of doing a hybrid of that, where we have resumed the on-site program on the first Tuesday of the month. And then now we have virtual programs for the rest of the Tuesdays in that month. So it's been really exciting to engage with members. And this program is mostly attended by our docents who really enjoy it because they get to take a deep dive into works in our permanent collection. And sometimes we will highlight works that are a part of our special exhibitions. So it's an opportunity for them to learn and grow and to kind of mingle and have conversations with us. So that's something that's really exciting. And then another exciting thing that's come out of COVID is a drawing class that we launched last fall. It's called Drawing from Experience. And so this was kind of a pivot from a pre-existing program that we were offering called Drawing in the Galleries. So at our Friday evening programs, we would hire Georgia State drawing instructors to give lessons in the gallery. We had live drawing models. And so it was a really nice opportunity for folks to come in and get some personalized drawing lessons. And so since we aren't able to do that, we have kind of pivoted to this outdoor drawing experience. So we are still working with one of the instructors from Georgia State to put on this program. So it was actually quite successful, and we're bringing it back this spring. So we're going to move on to the next slide. And this is where we'll actually talk about Friday night programming. So these are like the large scale programs that the High Museum offers. These are our monthly programs. So Friday Night Jazz, we offer every third Friday of the month, and High Frequency Friday, formerly known as First Fridays, is offered every first Friday of the month. And so these programs are open to both members and not yet members. And you'll see information about pricing on the slide. So these programs feature music and dancing. These are programs that are that kind of range from the younger adult to the older population before creative aging I would say Friday Jazz was a program where we saw most of our older population in attendance. So these are programs that we're really excited that we have been able to bring back with COVID, with new precautions that we're taking, keeping in mind social distancing. And so it's really exciting to see how we've been able to bring these back in a new way, kind of like reimagining the way that Atlantans want to be entertained at the museum. So we have actually now kind of like spread out the program. So we have music in multiple spaces. So we'll have maybe a trio out on our Orkin Terrace, and then maybe a quintet in the atrium. So we're just giving people a variety of entertainment options, and it's doing really well. The programs are selling out, and we're really excited about that. And so if we'll move on to our final slide to kind of tie everything in, just to discuss with you all a little bit about marketing for these programs. We are really excited that we're kind of looking at programming in new ways and marketing these programs, focusing on our featured musicians and DJs to leverage their networks. So we've worked with our marketing team to create these graphics for our events. And so we share them with the featured DJs or musicians, which they share on their platforms. So it's been really nice to engage with their communities in that way because, obviously, they're excited to share this opportunity that they are, performing at the High Museum. And then their network is, able to kind of, I guess, go from there and join us at these programs. So we've been able to, we've seen a lot of interest from that. So we're more than likely going to continue this and see where it leads. But it's been really exciting to rethink and reimagine these programs in COVID times. So if you all have any questions for me and Evelyn, we are happy to take them and engage with you all.
Thank you guys so much for your presentation. It's really, really cool to hear about all the cool programs you guys have. Before we get to any member Q&A questions, our e-board did come up with a few questions to ask both of you, and you can just, take turns answering, decide whoever would answer it best or whatever. But our first question for both our guests is, how did you get your job? How did you come to work at the High? What was that process like for both of you?
All right, I'm happy to go first, although my situation is is a little unique. But starting in college, I always knew I wanted to work in a museum, and so I kind of did everything I could while I was in college to sort of set me up for that. So I was a curatorial intern for almost 2 years at the museum on UGA's campus. I was an ambassador for the art school. I was in the Art History Society, and so things like that. But it is hard getting a job in the arts. And so I applied to various jobs for months, which, let me tell you, if you're a senior and you haven't started applying for jobs, maybe get a head start. But my mom actually worked at the High Museum as well. She was the assistant to the CFO for a couple years. And then she left right before she gave birth to me. So long time ago, she worked there. But Rhonda, the CFO, is still the CFO at the High Museum. And so, finally I've been applying to jobs. Summer is coming. I'm about to graduate. And my mom was like, let me email Rhonda and just see if she knows of anything. Not necessarily at the High, but just anything in Atlanta. And so she emails her. They do a little back and forth. I get Rhonda's email. And I'm on vacation during the summer, and I get an email from Rhonda, and she's just like, call me anytime after 1. And I'm like, okay. So I give her a call. She lets me know that Virginia, the director of education, is looking for a right-hand man. And, she gives me her contact information. And so I email Virginia directly. I introduce myself, let her know I'm interested, and I apply for the position. And here we are. a year and 7-ish months later.
That's a really cool story. Yema?
Love that.
So I've been at the High Museum for 2 years now, and before the High Museum, I worked as a gallery assistant at Georgia State University's Art Gallery. I started working there after I received my Bachelor of Arts degree in art history. And then from there, I worked for the city of Atlanta. I worked in the Office of Recreation. I actually am a dancer, so I started a dance program. So that was kind of my introduction to programming professionally. And from there, I did some freelance work, just in assisting friends, colleagues with dance events, music programs, and was able to leverage those skills and applied for the coordinator of public programs position at the High Museum. And little known tidbit, a friend of mine, Farron Manuel, we had actually met right after I graduated college while he was working at the Clark Atlanta Art Museum. And he left there and came to the High Museum. So when this position opened, I just let him know, like, hey, Farron, I'm interested in this position. And I don't know how I got the job, if maybe they just saw my application or if he had spoken to someone before they did the selecting process. But I do think that it is all about, who that definitely helps, having someone, because when there's such a large candidate pool, I think having someone that you're connected to is really important. So just making sure that you maintain relationships is definitely something to consider when applying for jobs. So yeah.
Yeah, those connections are, everyone always talks about it's who you know and everything like that. So that's really important. So our next question would be, what does a typical day in your life at work look like? So if we were to follow you around on just a random day, what would you be doing?
Okay, so I can jump in, Evelyn, if you want to kind of switch up the order. So a typical day for me looks like meetings. I'm in a lot of meetings. I started out in meetings on my first day, and I'm just like, I don't know anyone's name. I don't know what you do, but I'm in these meetings, and I kind of just like got an idea or a sense of what my work would be from attending these meetings. So a typical day looks like meeting with our creative services team to discuss graphics and imagery that goes on promotional materials for our programs, meeting with marketing to discuss getting the word out about these events, meeting with the parking office sometimes for our programs to discuss parking for performers and musicians and parking for members at these programs. We work really closely with membership and museum interpretation. So it just kind of runs the gamut. A typical day for me is never really the same. And I mean, while my work focuses a lot on arts administration, I am constantly thinking creatively. I'm troubleshooting, I'm trying to plan ahead, and no program is alike. So with each program, things are really different. So it's always exciting.
I would say the same. My days vary so drastically depending on what's happening. Like today, for example, we had a board meeting in the morning. And so it's like prepping for the board meeting, having the board meeting, and then switching gears and moving into our Masterworks in Mindfulness program that I mentioned. And so kind of switching from communicating with our board members to coming back to my desk, and I have like 4 people who want to register for the program. So a lot of like communicating with other people, communicating with other departments like Yema talked about. Um, but it's always different. Since I'm the department coordinator, I sometimes work in other areas as well. Like, so on Thursdays, I sometimes watch Toddler Thursday while my coworker takes her lunch break. Or last week, I had 2 teachers reach out to me who wanted me to create a tour for them. And so doing like creating tour guides for teachers. And so it is always different, but that's something that I love about my job is there is so much variation day to day. And it's really exciting.
That's really cool. It's always nice to have like a break from a routine and just get to try something new. Our next question is what's one thing you dislike or slash find stressful about your job?
I can go. Yema, I'm curious if ours will be similar. For me, stressful is like 2 weeks before a program, where like leading up to a program where it's like I feel like you're working with a ton of departments. You know, you have someone who has to build the tickets for the program itself, and then you have someone who creates like what it's going to look like on the web and publishes it to the website. If you're contracting an instructor, you have to, you know, find someone to teach the program, draw up a contract, figure out how you're going to pay them, what's the honorarium, then you have to actually pay them. So I think right before a program is the most stressful because you are just like hoping and wanting, you know, so many people to be interested, and you're meeting with so many people to make sure you can get the word out as fast as possible and to as many people as possible.
I would say I share those sentiments, Evelyn. And I think the gifts and the curses that we're always busy. And so we have programs that are ongoing. We have new programs that we're developing. So it's like there's really never any downtime for us. We don't really have a point in the year where there aren't any programs going on. So we're constantly like thinking, constantly reaching out to new people. We're like scouting talent, you know, we're working with accounting, we're doing all of these things. So we wear so many hats. And I think it's great to just think about like all of the skills that we're able to acquire in our roles. But you have to really stay organized. And I'm just like constantly making little notes. And I feel like pre-COVID, my desk was full of sticky notes, and I love the lined post-it notes. And I would just have like a sticky note for each program, and then just kind of like, okay, I need to check off this accounting thing. I need to check off this membership thing or this thing with marketing and all of that. So I kind of created a system for myself to where now I kind of have a rhythm. And it took me, I would say, like a little over a year to really find that rhythm. But now I kind of just kind of go with that flow, but definitely staying on top of things and staying organized is something that I feel is a great skill to have in these types of roles.
Exactly. Yeah, those are good problems to have being busy, I guess. It's stressful, but good. So you guys have sort of touched on this a little bit about working with the marketing department about with your programming, but I just want to sort of dive into that a little bit. Like, how do you collaborate with the PR and marketing departments at the High to spread awareness about your programming, and like, what does that relationship look like?
So I can jump in and just say that in public programs, we work really closely with marketing. We actually have weekly meetings with our marketing teams just to kind of discuss what's coming out that week or in the upcoming weeks. So we work, I would say, the closest with marketing to get the word out about these programs. And marketing is really helpful in kind of like zhuzhing up language that we have for copy that goes on the web, or you know, creating those social media graphics that have been so helpful in promoting our programs. So marketing, we work really closely with them. Our programs would not be possible without them. So definitely. Evelyn, do you want to?
Yeah, I mean, just like Yema said, meeting with marketing, I definitely don't have to go to as many meetings as Yema does. But we have like a bi-weekly meeting, me and Yema, and then our other coworker who works with family programming, and then some folks from the communications team where we just talk about all the things we have going on. And, you know, if I have a program where I would like to see attendance boosted, we talk about what we can do to make that happen. So whether it's making sure when we send out our newsletters that the little blurb is like at the top of the email rather at the bottom, or doing an Instagram story or something like that. And so just constant communication and then gauging kind of our registration lists and what that looks like.
For sure. And they get so excited when our programs sell out.
Yeah.
They feel like it's their baby, like, yes, we did it. And it's true, it's definitely a joint effort. So that's something, and even know before you go. So we send out an email to our registrants and just let them know, like, hey, these are some facts that you'll need to know if you're planning to be on site for this program. You know, this has changed since COVID, or for our virtual programs, like, this is what to expect. So we work really closely with our marketing and communications team to ensure the success of our programs respectively.
That's really cool. Yeah, communication is definitely key with big projects with lots of hands on the project. Our last question that our e-board came up with is, what are some PR, marketing, communication trends that you think might influence your community engagement tactics in the upcoming year? Like, you think the museum will get on TikTok, things like that. Is there anything new that you think that you could do to spread awareness about your programming, and what are you looking forward to?
That's a good question. I feel like I kind of talked about, I think the results from this audience research study that we're doing is going to be very telling of if we need to shift or things that we need to do, especially in 2021. Like for me, a lot of people I talked to on the phone when I interviewed mentioned that they read the newspaper or like the AJC and stuff. And so figuring out, maybe that'll be our new tactic, is putting more of our programs in print and things like that. But I'm not, yeah, something like that.
I would say since COVID, our program attendance is kind of skewing younger for the on-site programs. So I think we're definitely going to be interested in following trends that young people are interested in to get the word out about our programs. We have been relying a lot on Instagram. So that's been a real big push for us in promoting our events. So I'm curious to see what rolls out, because I feel like we just kind of have to stay on top of whatever is popular. And we do use Twitter, but I don't think our Twitter account is as active, or not nearly as active as Instagram.
Yeah, that's really interesting how we sort of discount newspapers these days because they're like, oh, everything's online. But I guess especially with programming for older adults, that may be a useful tactic that no one would really think about. So that's really cool. I'll just open it up to any of our members if we have any additional questions that you'd like to ask our guests before we wrap up our meeting.
I have a question. So I guess this is specifically for Evelyn with working with older people. What do you think is the most surprising thing that you learned about that target audience after working with them that you just thought was surprising?
Yeah. Gosh, well, certainly through the interviews, there were surprises right and left. I think something that not a lot of people think of is so many of the people that I interviewed, and then just, being around older adults during programming, is they don't really put themselves in that box. So many people I spoke to, whenever I asked questions that were specific to their perceptions on aging, they're like, I don't know, I've never really thought about it. I don't think of myself as an older adult. And then so many people too are really active. I spoke to someone who teaches yoga, and like one of her goals is to get more older people to participate in yoga. Another woman, she's a really big biker, and but she wished that there were more safer places to bike in Atlanta. So I think that's like not one of the surprising things, was how many of the stereotypes are in fact really wrong, and so many people I talk to as well, it's like, especially with COVID, they're watching hours of Netflix too, just like us, it's like Netflix and reading and anything else to pass the time. So I would say that there were definitely not very many of your average stereotypes that you get with working with these people.
I have one more for Yema, I guess. It would be how long does it take to plan a typical program that's not like an ongoing one that you're sort of just coming up with from scratch? And how long does that process take, and what does that look like?
Question. And I would say that we kind of follow guidelines from each of our like departments or sub-departments. So like when you're working on building a program, you have to reach out to this teacher or musician to figure out if they're interested and willing, available, negotiating, all of that. And then from there, we have to get tickets built. So we might need like 6 to 8 weeks in advance to get those tickets built for that event so that it can go on the web. And then from there, we'll need to work with our creative services team. So they may need 4 weeks in order to get materials out for that. And then marketing, just depending on whatever window they feel is, appropriate for putting out the word on this event. We need to make sure that we have all of our copy ready for that. So I would say at least 8 to 12 weeks, we need to like really have that plan hashed out before we're actually ready to launch it. So, and even further than that, before COVID, I was trying to work out like 6 months ahead just to maybe have a full lineup of Friday Jazz for the year. So it really just depends. With COVID, we're kind of working out. We don't have as big a window because we're still just kind of like playing things by ear and seeing if guidelines change in terms of like the amount of people that can be on site for a program. So we're not working as further out as we would have liked to before, but we definitely have to plan very far out in advance to ensure success.
It's crazy how long it can take for something that's a one-day thing, but it takes so much preparation in advance. That's really
Absolutely.
cool.
And the great thing I will say about programs is we have these small milestones along the way. So like each program is like, yes, we did it. Whew. Okay, now on to the next one, because next week we've got this program coming, but it's like you're always like getting these small little tokens of like gratification because you have this successful program, and then now you are amped up to do the next one. So it definitely keeps you going, because I'm the kind of person that takes things in digestible chunks. So I feel like this works well for me.
That's really cool. I'll just check real quick if we have any more questions before we wrap up.
I've got one question, Jamie.
Okay.
Evelyn, you had brought up some really interesting information about conducting research to inform how you do programming at the high. Can you explain to our members why research is important in this process, not only before planning, but also looking at how current programs are going and then evaluating after the programs are completed?
Oh, absolutely. So especially for the creative aging department at the High Museum, research was kind of vital in order to kind of get to where we want to be. The creative aging department really just launched a year ago, last year, when our head of creative aging and lifelong learning, Laurel, began working in January. And so we're just completely starting from scratch. And kind of the things I touched on, especially with the older adult population, there's a lot of negative stereotypes about older adults. There's a lot of just like kind of pushing them aside. And so, especially with a group like that, I think it's really important to conduct research and to expand on it. And so, even though we're doing this research study now, we interviewed 100 people. It's like the pool of people that we interviewed is still not as representative of the Atlanta community as we'd like it to be. You know, it definitely skews like more wealthy, like white women. And so that doesn't represent what Atlanta looks like. And so that could be something that we continue to work on. Another thing that we do is we've been sending out surveys. So we had the same Masterworks in Mindfulness class in the fall. And after that, we sent out surveys to everyone, finding out, how did you learn about this program? What could we improve? So constantly tweaking our programs and constantly asking our community, our audience, what can we do better? How are you learning about these programs? Maybe we need to figure out a different way to ensure that these people are aware of the things that we're doing. And so with this research study, this is really the first time that I've done anything like this, and it's been so fascinating. So I'm excited to see the end result. And once we get this visioning document, how this will inform all of our actions. And then if we decide to take more steps to continue to research and learn about this audience.
That's really cool. All right. So do we have any other questions before we wrap up? All right. So thank you so much, Evelyn and Yema, for being here tonight. It was really, really interesting to learn all about community engagement at the high and all about the work you guys do. So thanks again for being here.
Thank you so much for having us.
Before you guys do leave, we like to take a group photo at every meeting. So it's a little different now. It's more like a group screenshot, but if everyone, if you want to turn on your camera for the photo, you can go ahead and do that now. If not, we'll take the photo. Dr. Weed, are you going to do that screenshot for us? Thank you. All right, everyone say engagement. Yay. Okay. Thank you guys so much. Thanks to all our members and our guest speakers today. I had a great time.
Thank you, Yema and Evelyn. It was so nice
So
to meet you.
much. It was great being here. Wishing you all the best in your future endeavors. And I'll drop my email address in the chat just in case anyone decides to reach out, has any questions.
That'd be great.
So much.
So
Would you mind if we connected with you on LinkedIn too?
Sure.
Oh, awesome. Yay.
Will do. I love those LinkedIn connections. That's
I know.
what we're talking about.
Absolutely. Thank you
Awesome.
so much.
Thank you both. Have a great night.
Have a good night.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.